Hey, how's it going? Matthew, aka EZBOT, back with another Elektron Talk, episode 38. Today is cool. We're gonna bring on SURCO, and me and SURCO are gonna talk about using the Octatrack as a performance mixer. We're gonna talk about the Push 3. We're gonna talk a bit about the Oxy 1. We're gonna talk about integrating Elektron gear with the Push 3, perhaps. It's just a discussion to have, and potential updates to the performance templates, the performance mixer templates that I make. He just got his hands on it, so I'm excited to get his impression on what he thinks about it. Yeah, so let me bring him on. Just give me one sec. As I switch chairs here really quick. All right. Come on down.
Howdy.
What up?
What's going on? How you doing?
I'm good. We got Eric here. Eric's the best. We love Eric. Me and Eric got to hang out at NAMM quite a bit in person, which was really cool. And got to play a show together, and he killed it, of course.
As did you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Rocking out.
Yeah, very rocking out. That's kind of like what my sets are like, is a bit more rock and roll.
That's one of the things I loved about that show, was that every single act that played was totally different from every other act that played.
It was, yeah.
So it was very cool.
Yeah, it was. That was a lot of fun. I would love to do that again. It was really great to have so many artists from different areas playing together, or different areas of music.
Yep.
Yeah, that was really killer. And seeing a Pauly and Tracker solo performance also kind of blew me away. What's his name? Martin or something, I think, from Pauly.
Yeah. His performance name is Isobutane.
Yeah, Isobutane. That was, yeah, he's killer. He's just a stellar performer.
Yep. I got, actually, when I went to Super Booth, I got to see him perform again in an underground techno club in Berlin, solo on his Pauly end as well. So it was pretty cool.
That is so sick.
Yeah, he was great.
God, I wish I had gotten to go to Super Booth. That was just a little bit out of touch for me. Like it was just a bit of money and time to get myself over there. Too hard to coordinate, but
next time.
I am jealous that you get I do really want to go. I do.
You should. It was the most fun music event I think I've been to, because it doesn't feel like a trade show. There, like when you're in the rooms, it feels like a trade show. And then there's like, it's all over this outdoor park, and there's like little cabins that have people in them with their synths. And then there's different stages all over the place with shows going on. So it's kind of like this outdoor festival combined with a trade show. So it was actually very cool. It was tons of fun.
It would have been a lot more fun if I was there.
It would have. It would have. We had the whole synth YouTube gang there. It was pretty funny, actually. You would have fit right in with the group.
I would have cringed myself too hard. Again, anytime there's like too much YouTube stuff going on, I start being like, ugh, I'm YouTubing myself to death. But I would have loved to have hanged out with everybody, of course. That would have been awesome to get to meet everybody I haven't met.
It was cool to meet people in real life I've not only have I seen on YouTube, but also chatted with a whole bunch, and whether it's via Zoom call or texting back and forth, like people that I've met through doing this, and actually get to meet them all in person was a blast, and get to hang out and have beers and shoot the breeze about all kinds of stuff. So it was pretty cool.
Dude, that sounds really fun. Yeah. Well, what I want to really talk to you about today on the lovely EZBOT channel here is you just got your hands on the performance mixer the newest template that I made for the Octatrack, where I completely redesigned the whole concept. And a lot of it has to do with input I got from you directly, because you were somebody who's always been really communicative with me about like what you think would be cool. And I've taken some of your ideas where you're like, yo, Matt, can you do this? And I did, and I've done those things, like the SURCO riser that's in the template,
right,
and that's made it into the newest version. And there's a bunch of variations of it in there. They aren't called that. In fact, I even released a video called How to Make an Epic Build-Up on the Octatrack. That is how to make the effect that you asked me to create for the template. So
Nice.
if anybody wants to know how to do that, that's the video that you want to watch because it'll teach you how to do that.
Well, the interesting thing is where that came from is I've been a DJ since like the early 90s. And that effect is something that I love to do on DJ mixers that you do with two hands while you're doing something to do a build up and, take your kick out and do this thing to do a big build up and then drop in back into your beat again. And so when we were talking about that, I was like, yeah, I would love it if it could do that because I don't have a DJ mixer anymore in my live setup. So I can't do that anymore. And it was an effect that I always loved to do. And you made it awesome.
Yeah, I think it turned out really good too. And I think it's exceptionally good now in the newest performance template because of the way that for one, I've just gotten better at designing it because I approached the build on it where I had an idea already in mind as I was working on here that I was like, oh, I'm going to make these dual buses. And I was like, I had reservations about adding a compressor on the Octatrack, but then with this new development, so I'm very curious. You've run your gear through it. Do you notice a difference in the sound versus what you were doing before to this?
I mean, I notice a difference in the sound, and I don't know how much of it is compressor and how much of it is the effects being different, because you were giving me a hard time about this, and I was like many versions behind because I had a bunch of shows back to back to back, and I didn't want to change it up while I was just about to go into another show. And so I finally had a break right now where I didn't have any shows at all. So it was nice to be able to like jump into this new template. And so this was like 4 versions that I jumped over. So all of a sudden, all these effects are really different and really great. And so I don't know how much of it is that, how much of it was from this last bit. But yeah, they sound great.
Cool. Well, I mean, that's good to know. That's good to know. I am curious how it will sound after you've been messing with it more. And this is not about like my design. It's about like, what do you think of the Octatrack doing compression at all? It's like, yeah, I have my compressors set up the way that I set them up. I base them off of like a lot of Elektronaut feedback from other folks who have worked on the compressors on the Octatrack, and then I dialed it into what I think made a better mix. So they are my settings, but they're very close to like what a lot of people have agreed are really good settings for the compressors on the Octatrack. And there is a huge difference. And they are like, sometimes it might sound like it's adding more volume to your mix, but it really is doing that job of the compressor. It's making your mix sound bigger than it actually is. In terms of decibels.
More perceived volume.
Yeah, and I thought that was really helpful. And the idea that you could so now you can compress your drum bus, and then you just lock the compressor settings in on a per pattern basis. I know you don't work in patterns as much, but you do. Like, you're not working on just one pattern, right? On the track. So you're using it the way that I was originally using it, like way, way, way years ago. Okay, so you just have one pattern. No program changes at all. So this is a whole different perspective. So like for folks that there's folks that do what I do, which is like very much a singer-songwriter perspective, writing in music where I have I build out a pattern, I perform it like a DJ techno kind of artist, even though the music isn't necessarily always techno or house or anything. Sometimes it's just like whatever. It's electro, I guess. It's kind of like the vibe that I do. But I'm still performing it out kind of like I would a DJ artist. Tell us, whoever's watching, tell us why do you do it the way you do it?
So, I mean, I think a lot of that, like you just mentioned, you came from a singer-songwriter background. I came from a DJ producer background. And so for me, the whole idea of wanting to start to perform live was I wanted a way to combine those two things that I really love to do into something new and unique. And I, after almost 30 years of DJing. I was frankly getting a little bored with it, and it's still fun. Like I still love to DJ house music, for example. Like if I'm going to play house, I would rather do that. I would rather DJ that than play that live.
How
but
come?
As far as techno goes, I don't know. There's something about it. It's like, it feels like the tracks are the way they were produced is the way they're supposed to sound, if that makes any sense. Where with techno, the tracks are much more like tools that you use. And so like, for example, when I was DJing techno, I mean, even years ago, like I've DJ'd vinyl and CDJs and Serato and Tractor, and I've used every different setup because I always like to kind of change and try different things. I used to love to DJ techno with Tractor because I could have 4 different tracks, and I could take the low end from one and a drum part from another and a vocal from another and make another track while I was DJing. Okay. So I always really liked that. And I was using the pieces and parts as tools to make something else and to get a reaction out of the crowd and things like that. Where for me, house tracks kind of feel like that's what they're supposed to sound like. You know, like you can do little.
Feels like it's baked in is kind of what.
Yeah, like it's like, I don't know. Like I almost feel like I don't want to mess with it because like it doesn't feel like it's made to be messed with. It feels like, you know, it's a totally different format of music as far as like the songwriting format and with vocals and breaks, and it's much more of a kind of a pop music format. And so it's, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like it should be messed around with.
Which is
funny.
Especially
because I love classic house music too, and I don't want to mess with it. I want it to sound like it's supposed to sound.
I mean, your homie, our homie, but your homie even more so, considering you're in Colorado. Your homie Alex from WMD, or from what's their new company called?
It's AMMT.
Amped. Okay, and then Alex will perform on a fully modular system and completely improvise it, doing house.
Yep, I've seen him play a 90-minute long, totally improvised disco house set on the exact same case that he plays techno in a club in Berlin on. It's the same case. He doesn't redo his case for shows.
Those dual Rossum assimilators will do that for you.
Yeah, exactly.
There's enough samples in there for sure.
Yeah.
Which I was telling you earlier before we started this stream. So I picked up an assimilator, and I have to say that the workflow on it is just whack. But it's like, it sounds so good and it's really cool, and like I could see we're using it like kind of like on a Digitakt, how you do single cycle waveforms, and you know, turn this into your synthesizer as well as your drum machine. You can do that with the assimilator, but even better because it won't alias at all. Like, and you'll have just like massive pitch tracking because it's a really powerful. It's a really powerful sampler / synthesizer, but the workflow on it sucks, and that's why I keep using Elektron, because the workflow doesn't suck. You know what I mean? Like I feel like it's on Rails enough to make it so I can make music, but it's not on Rails so much that I can't improvise. Which is like your whole shtick, right? Is I don't need like what? Don't you have like a bunch of patterns like saved in your Digitakt or something, like drum patterns that are like go-tos?
Kind of. So the way my setup is that all my Digitakt has drum samples in it that I've made on the rhythm here, and then I just resample them and load them in the Digitakt because it's smaller and easier to take with me when I go places. But what I basically do is it's all on the same project. Each one of the patterns is just kind of a drum kit, because since Digitakt doesn't do drum kits the way the rhythm does, so every one is just a drum kit. So on 1 is always a kick, 2 is always a clap or a snare, 3 and 4 are always percussion. 5 can be whatever. I kind of get random with that one. 6 is closed hat, 7's open hat, and then 8 is usually an atmospheric thing.
So
but they're all different,
identical to me.
Yeah,
that's literally identical.
That's funny.
Workflow.
It's funny because that's not how they're labeled either. Like you just ended up in some random thing that's the same.
It's because you kept the kick and you kept the labels that worked for the music, and then the other ones were kind of amorphous, right?
Right.
Or amorphic. They could be whatever you want. But I think a lot of people do that same thing, like exactly that, because we all have this same idea with it. But to me, it's always the drum machine, right? And that's pretty similar to you. Right?
Yeah, and for me, it's each one of those. So each pattern is a drum kick or is a drum kit, and I'll have things like the kicks will be based around a 4 on the floor kick always. But then the thing that I love about using Elektron gear, one of the reasons why I always use this stuff performing live, is because even if I have a 4 on the floor kick and all of a sudden in the middle of the show, I want to change that up, it's super easy to sequence that and just change it on the fly, which, you think about some other gear that's out there, it's really hard to do that, to get in and actually make it sound good. And with this, it's really easy to jump in and modify it. So I do that all the time. And the other thing that I love about it is being able to really get in and tweak the sound while you're performing. So, if I'm cruising along and I say, oh, you know what, I want for this next track, their next idea that I have, I want to bring in a kick that's, less, it has less of a transient. So it's less percussive or less, hitting. So I can just go in really quick and change that so that when I bring it in, it'll be a different kind of kick. So it's not like, like with Roland, for example, if you have a TR8 or TR8S and you've got your drums in there and you want something different, you have to load up a new sample, because trying to get in there and tweak that drum sound, you're going to spend the next 15 minutes diving through menus to try and make that one little change.
Well, that's also kind of like working in modular too. So it's like if you need a new kick drum for a song, you have to do it during the performance. And if you don't remember how it's supposed to be set up, like, you're totally effed. You know what I mean? And so, like, that's where modular to me, and you're using a lot of modular when you perform live. At least that's what I've seen you do. Not in your current setup that you had when you showed me on the camera, but I'm
trying something different. So here, you wanted to talk a little bit about the Oxy. This is a perfect chance to talk about that, because one of the things that I found as a really cool use for me with the Oxy is, with it being just a sequencer, it can sequence whatever. So, when I'm traveling, like I travel a lot for my day job. So when I'm traveling and I'm on a plane, I can use the Oxy sequencer with my iPhone. And I can, write patterns that are cool, or, oh, this is a cool bass line, or this is a cool whatever. And I can write it using some random synth in my iPhone and my AirPods while I'm sitting on a plane. Then I can just send that somewhere else when I either get back to my studio to write a track, or when I go to perform. So right now I was writing patterns because I didn't have my modular setup. I was using the Syntakt as a 12-track 12 mono synths basically. And I was sequencing those 12 synths from the Oxy, coming up with ideas. And then when I want to, I can just pull that out and plug the Oxy into my modular and have those same patterns that I just came up with, but send them to different synths with different sounds.
I like that. And I liked that workflow, and I understand the workflow that you're coming from, like, and I understand why you like the Oxy for that workflow. And I had the Oxy for quite some time, and I only ended up getting rid of it because, honestly, because I just end up using this gear so much, and it is a $800, $750 piece of hardware to have just sitting around is like, I'm not made of money, so I'm like, I gotta switch it out and get some other stuff coming in. Partly because I sold it once I picked up the Push 3. And which I do want to chat about a bit, but I'm still curious. Like, so, well, one thing I wanted to talk about really quick on the Elektron side, along with the Oxy too, is when I'm performing, I'm using pattern mutes, and I imagine you're not, because you're not changing patterns as much, right?
No.
So like I have this discussion. I do a lot of lessons online with people, and as I'm teaching somebody, like, I always teach them like the best practice is pattern mutes, because it's not for you, and it isn't for a lot of people that are performing like techno live and stuff. Like, I see, like, when I played with like Jeremy or other folks that are like doing a lot of Elektron stuff, they're doing it on YouTube or whatever, they're just making a lot of music on Elektron. They're not using pattern mutes the way I'm using pattern mutes. They're using the global mutes, because the idea with global mutes is, take a kick out, move to your next pattern, but your kick is still out in the next pattern, because that's your intention. And
and that's how I use it totally.
Yeah, and that's because you can improvise with that.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, so like if you were to do that exactly what you just said, and then you move to a different pattern, which is, in my case, it's just a different drum kit. I do that, you'll hear like a hi-hat change if your hi-hat is still playing and not muted. But then you can drop in your kick after whatever you're doing, or you can, you know, have certain things come across and you can keep a certain amount of consistency going from pattern to pattern, where again, this goes back to DJing. So like if you're DJing two tracks together, one of the reasons why everybody loves Allen and Heath mixers when you DJ is because it has a 4-band EQ. And so you can EQ out different frequency bands while you bring in the band from the new track. So you're basically bringing in parts and pieces of the song one by one to make your transitions really smooth. And so what I'm doing is kind of the same thing here is I'm going to transition over a hat. Then I'm going to transition over a bass line. Then I'm going to transition over a tom. Then I'm going to transition over the kick drum. Not I'm going to go from pattern 1 to pattern 2 and they all jump from one to the other.
Right.
That's
something
it's
that's
just
hard to
totally
do.
different way to do it.
Well,
but,
I mean, but it's also difficult to do on. I mean, you could do that with. We could do that if we ran all of these boxes. I even thought about building this myself. We could run all of these boxes. His audio is kind of loud. Is there any way you could turn your mic down just a smidge?
Probably. Yeah.
If we just ran all of these boxes into their own separate EQs before they went into the Octatrack, you could kind of do that. Because I've tried getting a workflow down on the Octatrack that allows me to do that exact workflow, where if I transition over to, like, say, a 4-bar recording or an 8-bar loop, and then also have a, not a filter, but have the DJ EQ that's in the Octatrack, and I could DJ EQ that out, and then what we could do, I guess, so this is where it gets lost, is that if you transition over to a recording, then I can't hear the other mix anymore. So even if I EQ stuff, I can't bring it back unless I was to crossfade back over from this being EQ'd. I don't know. It would be a whole nother scene that I'd have to, like, get my brain wrapped around. Like, how can I do because I really want that. I want that in here.
It's funny. When I was playing at ADE last year and I was talking with Lucian Fort, that does Analog Kitchen, who has his whole YouTube channel is all about playing live. He was like, he said, I have no idea how you do this totally improvised. He said, that would make me so nervous. And he's like, I need to have at least some sort of a foundation that I'm going off of. And I told him, I said, that would make me so nervous because at least this way I have control over every individual piece of everything I'm doing. Where with that, if something goes wrong with a pattern, that would freak me out. That if all of a sudden there was some glitch and this machine didn't change with this machine and the patterns didn't, and it would just freak me out. And so, like, it's to each his own. It's great that everybody can kind of do their own thing because each way is its own, unique set of stresses and unique set of controls and fun things. And yeah.
Yeah. So for me, like, I feel like very confident that workflow would be fine. Like, on a personal level, like, I wouldn't like walk into it and be like, I'm freaking out, like I'm spooked by it, because I feel like that's what I learned first was to do that, not the DJ aspect of it, because I don't know how to DJ, but the aspect of using, like, global mutes, or that idea of, like, you mute a part, and when you move to the next part, things stay muted. You bring this element in, because that's kind of like, because I didn't even know that there was pattern mutes on here for a long time. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of us didn't know, like, so many features like, did you know there's solo on these? You can solo tracks.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you can, but it requires a MIDI controller. Like, there's so much, like, there's a CC message that will solo tracks on all 3 of these boxes.
That's crazy.
And you can solo on the Octatrack by holding Q when you're in the mixer, and that's a solo. So, like, there's stuff that I was just learning later throughout the process, and then eventually, like, for me, I feel like the pattern mutes thing versus the global mutes. This is a good topic because I conversated about this quite a bit. Is that with pattern mutes, I know you're talking about how we can transition over to a part and, like, it's a little bit more improvised in that way, but it also means that it's improvised. There's also that downfall of improv. that I can still, from in my perspective, what seems to be why I choose to do it the way I do, is that when I move to the next pattern, it is exactly how I intended it to be. I can get there any way I want.
Right.
Like I can get there, but if I know that the next pattern should have a kick out and a new hi-hat, then I designed it that way. So when I get to that pattern, and I can still do all those improv stuff. So that's where I'm like, I get it. It works. The Mark II devices, like this old sucker, all of these boxes, analog 4, analog rhythm, modular included, I feel like they all fit into the same circle of the pie chart. They're all in the improv with me, please section. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where they're like,
Right.
if you try and have a clear intention, like modular does not want that. Like it just doesn't, it's not built for it. Even if you have a nerd sequencer or a polyend preset or anything, some sort of macro preset module, you're still gonna have a pretty messed up track, like usually. Right. You know what I mean? And like the analog 4 and the analog rhythm, they really lend themselves to your workflow. And that's why you don't see them with me, because really just because I don't want to work in kits. I have to do all these kind of like tricks, tips and tricks kind of like stuff to get myself to have them work the way that these work.
Yep.
Yeah, but you can still use these ones in the same way that you use those ones. That's what I like about the Digiline versus
we were talking about this right before we got on the stream, like how cool it is that this gear can all be used in so many different ways. So everybody can kind of come up with their own way to use it. Like there's functionalities of these machines that I use that other people don't. And there's things that I don't even know how to do that other people use. And that's cool. That's how it should be. Like figure out how to make it work. And what's great about these is that they're so flexible. And these and others, there's other machines as well out there that are really flexible. And that for me is great because then you can kind of customize it exactly the way you want it to work and whatever's more comfortable with you.
So speaking of flexible and all of that, we both have push 3s, and right now you're an Ableton user, right?
Yes.
And I'm a Bitwig user.
Yep. I've been producing on Ableton since Ableton 4.
Okay, so you've been producing on Ableton since it was a baby. And
yes.
I've been using Bitwig since around when it first came out, and I'm a Bitwig instructor. So Bitwig and me, we're homies. And Bitwig, to me, is very Elektron. It feels Elektron when you're writing in Bitwig. You can just, grab something and just basically, it's basically like trig lock stuff all over the place. The Push 3 added that. Ableton doesn't really have that. The Push 3 does. You can hold down a step and turn a knob. And that's very Elektron. And I think if they keep adding onto that, it's going to keep drawing my attention further and further to it. But I'm curious.
Yep.
What is your first impression of Push 3?
I've been really loving it, I have to say. It's got some funky stuff that they're still ironing out. It keeps getting better with every single update that I get. There's been a couple little random things. But I think it's pretty close to being there. I think for me, one of the impressions that I get when I see a lot of the feedback online and a lot of the, chats and what people are saying about it and stuff like that, it's, if this didn't have the name Ableton Push associated with it, and it was a brand new company that came out with a standalone piece of gear that did this, people would be freaking out that there's something that does what this does. But because it says Ableton Push, they say, well, but it doesn't have arrangement view. Oh, but it doesn't have this. It's like, well, yeah, but neither does anything else that works. Like there's other things that do, but they don't work properly. And, to have something that has, virtually unlimited tracks with virtually unlimited effects chains of every single effects type that you can imagine built into a standalone machine, it does not exist. Like flat out, there is nothing that does what this machine does. So if they weren't comparing it to the computer version of Ableton, I think people would be freaking out. But because they're just like, oh, well, this doesn't work. Oh, it doesn't use every single Max for Live. There's like 4 Max for Live devices. It doesn't work. So it doesn't count. There's like, yeah, but there's, 700 that it does. So it's really funny to me to see the perspective because it's an Ableton device.
I agree with you. I think like I was kind of one of those people when I first got it too. And like I had bought one within 5 minutes of its announcement. Like I was waiting and I hit that button. And just serendipitous, I suppose you could say. And and when I've got it and I love it and it sounds amazing. Like if there's a piece of hardware that I can unplug and put a pair of headphones on, you know, it rivals the kind of sounds I can get out of my modular system. But just to be devil's advocate to what you just said about all that, like people being upset about it having Ableton. If you didn't own Ableton and you've never used Ableton and you buy the Push 3, if you don't buy Push Suite, which is $700, if you don't buy that too, you don't have the Push 3. You have a thing that's kind of Push 3. So you have to buy that, and it comes to a total of $2,700. So it's rivals buying and getting into modular,
right?
I think. But if you're an Ableton user, and you buy it, you're just set. It's just dope. So like,
I think that's I think that's kind of this weird in middle ground, because the Ableton users are the ones who are like, well, it doesn't do this, but it doesn't do this. And then the ones that haven't used Ableton are like, wow, but you have to spend all this money on it. But if you think about it in the context of other gear that's out there compared with what it does, like take the Ableton name off of it. And let's say it just cost $2,700 and it came with everything that it came with. You're looking at, you know, how much is the new MPC, that the SE version or whatever it was of the MPC X? It's about the same price. This does 10 times what that does, and it's about the same price. You know, look at something. I'm going to beat up on your favorite thing, but look at an OP1 Field for $2,000.
How can you call that?
I'm just teasing you, but for like take that at $2,000 and look at what you get for the additional $700 here. Even if you were to just take something like, you know, pick a very capable groove box, add it together with an audio interface, with an MPE keyboard, with all of that stuff, you're way over $2,700. So it's, you know, I mean, I'm not here to sell anybody a Push 3, and I paid for mine. I paid for mine the day it came out as well. But you're right. I had 11 Suite already, because like I said, I've been upgrading it since forever. But the only reason why I keep upgrading is because I feel like it's worth it. And with this, just to be able to do what this does is pretty nuts.
Well, okay, so this is a really good discussion. I have a lot of things that have come to my mind right now. So like this has to do with Elektron, this has to do with modular, this has to do with Ableton, Push, Bitwig, whatever. When you're using a Push, so okay, the next Modbang show, which is on July 25th, so anybody who's in Seattle, come down to Modbang, the 4Bs. Jay Hosking's playing, Aria Bar, NRF, me, and a special guest, somebody we all know and love, will also be playing. Jay is playing with a Push 3, okay? And some other shit, maybe. Probably just the Push 3. That's what I would do. I would just play with the MIDI controller and the Push 3 and say, forget all the other gear. Because it doesn't need anything else. Like, it makes every sound. And sounds that nothing else makes. The Push 3's got you covered.
Yep.
But how close, like, part of the reason why we do this, right? There's a reason why we're doing this. And it is not to be on Ableton. And
well,
that is a
yes
lot
and
like
no.
being on it. And
yes and no. So it's, nobody wants to be writing music with a mouse. No one wants to do point and click music writing. That's why the Push was always such a cool device anyway, because it got you away from that. Then you take something like this, where like I love playing with hardware, playing live with hardware, because I love the tactile part of it. I love pushing buttons and turning knobs. This has a 64 pad MPE keyboard. It doesn't get more tactile than that, right? To be able to actually touch your music and manipulate it with your hands rather than take your mouse, point and click, drag and drop. So you actually get to touch the music and feel what it's doing, right? And so I think it's just such a different thing. And as with anything, as with Elektron boxes, as with anything, it's going to be amazing for some people, and other people are going to be like, yeah, I just don't feel it. It's just not my thing. You know, I would rather have I would rather have the old Deluge without a screen, because I don't want to look at a screen. I want to
Have
just
you
be able to
wait,
touch knobs and stuff.
Has somebody said that to you?
Well, before they came out with the screen, that was everybody's excuse. They were like, "Oh yeah, but when you don't have a screen, you don't get distracted. You don't look at it. It's not it. It's
That's like the
an
most welcome thing
MPC
ever on the
with a
Deluge.
big giant screen on it."
You know what I would like to see? Speaking of Deluge, I just was talking about this at Patchworks with some of my coworkers, and I was like, if Deluge came out, if Synthstrom came out with Deluge V2 with an upgrade, I know their CPU is like basically unlimited or whatever. You can have unlimited tracks and limited notes before it just starts crashing itself. But it's like not the best sounding groove box. It is by far the easiest machine to make music on. It just, you don't need to know what you're doing. You just grab that thing, your first 10 minutes in it, you've got a song. Just like, bam. And it's intuitive, very intuitive. The screen, incredibly helpful. Doesn't sound super great. That's my problem with it. But if they had a V2 of that, with like better sound engines on it, and I know they open source their OS or whatever, but I don't see how, what can you do? I don't know. Somebody added a compressor to it. That's cool. I'm curious about that. But like, is it going to cook the CPU? I don't really know. But I love the Deluge, and I feel like it inspired this. You know, the Poly Play, which just got an update, and which is what I was maybe going to stream on tonight, but no longer.
Until I distracted you.
Until you distracted me. But the Poly Play, which is update, is pretty dope. I do have a lot. I really like Poly on like a, and so I know you do too, and I know that you like them on a personal level.
Right.
And so do I. I like them as people, like not just their devices. I do have criticisms about their devices. I don't have criticisms about them as people, but I definitely have some critiques. Like I have quite a few. But it was.
And I think we have those for similar reasons. I think that if neither of us had owned a Digitakt before, we wouldn't be comparing that and going, "Oh, it should do this. Why doesn't it do this?" Just like the thing with the push with Ableton. Like if it all of it is perspective. It kind of comes from where you come from. If you're used to a certain workflow, and then you're like, "Well, damn, this doesn't do that. Why doesn't it do that? Everything should do that because my old thing did that." And I find it getting in my way a lot with things that for me, the only thing I've found recently that every time I thought it should do something, it did it, was the Oxy One. And that was why I was like, oh, I wish it did this. Oh, wait, it does. And if I couldn't figure it out, I would send a message to Manuel, the guy who wrote the software and designed the thing. And I'd be like, hey, can you do this? And he's like, oh, it does that. Here's how you do it. I was like, oh my God. Oh, okay. Of course it already does it. Like every single thing I could think of, it already does.
No, it does. Hang on. So somebody just posted this comment here, and as you were says, this is something we talked about just before he got here. Apparently, they, I don't know, isn't fully on topic, but I'm looking for a high-end modular sampler like the Assimilator. Yes, I have an Assimilator, and it's the best sounding sampler. Maybe the ER301 would actually compare with it. I actually prefer the ER301 as a sampler over the Assimilator so far because my experience with the Assimilator has been really hit or miss. Like I like the sounds, I like the functionality, I don't like the workflow, but it is a very high-end sampler. So my answer to you is, can it be an alternative to the Octatrack? Absolutely not. No way. Not even remotely. And that brings us
to the sampling part of the Octatrack, which is like 20th of what it does.
Yeah, to the sampling part of the Octatrack, and it kills the Octatrack as far as the sampler goes,
right?
Like because of the sample rate, and phase modulation and stuff. Like you don't have phase modulation on the Octatrack.
Yeah.
Like,
that's what I've told people whenever anybody asks, "Is this replace the Octatrack? Does this replace the Octatrack?" Every single thing the Octatrack does, there is something out there that does it better. Every single thing that it does, but there is nothing out there that does all of the things that it does.
That's what I'm saying.
So that's why it will always be, until somebody comes up with a new thing that is
that's what
flexible.
We thought the Push 3 was going to be. So that's like, this is the whole thing for me with the Push 3. And like when the Push 3 got announced, I knew about it because I had a homie or whatever. Like anyway, I knew it was coming. Yeah. And when it dropped, I was ready. I picked it up, and I was like about to have an existential thing in my life about the Push 3, specifically because of what I do with my time. All of my time is spent on the Octatrack. all of my time is spent on the Digitakt, the Syntakt, the Digitone, and intermittently bringing in other pieces of gear to sample and play with and teach people, because that's like how I make a living, is like teaching people stuff online and all that kind of stuff. This is what I do. And so I was like, wow, if this thing comes out, and I'm not somebody who's going to use something that sucks when there's something better. That's just not, like, if it
I'm the exact same way.
If it killed me and it was like, all of a sudden it was like, oh, your Octatrack template and all the stuff you do with Octatrack and all that stuff is all irrelevant now because of this machine. It would have just done that to me, and I would have accepted it and had to just bite the bullet and move on with it. But it didn't. It didn't do it because I picked it up and I used it, and it was not, or it's not a replacement for Elektron, because it's not Elektron. And it doesn't work like Elektron, and it is like the price tag to get into it is just like way, way, way higher. I do think an Octatrack Mark III would win. Yes, if that was a thing. And like that will be a thing like in like years from now. But you had something you were going to say.
Well, I was going to say, like, you were talking about the difference. So look, I have a Push 3 sitting here, but what I'm playing on is all Elektron gear and an Oxy 1. So it does different things, you know.
Yeah,
and
mine's
like
over by my computer because it has to connect to Ableton.
Well, mine doesn't. I don't even have Ableton running.
But I mean, if you don't go into Ableton, how are you going to put in automation? You can't add LFOs. I don't want to get into like a bitch fest about like where the software is on the OS, because I know it just came out and they're going to add every single feature that I think is missing. I know they will. Like Ableton's not going to let us down. But.
So the LFO thing, before you go there, there's somebody came out already with a Max for Live device that works on the Push 3 that's assignable LFOs, and one of them has I think 1 or 2 destinations for the individual LFO, and the other one you can send it to up to 8 different destinations, the same LFO. And because it's Ableton, you can add as many of them on a track as you want to.
Oh, okay.
So I could have 100 LFOs each going to 8 destinations.
All right, shoot me a link to that, please.
But let me tell you, the weird thing is, and this is, I'll bitch about it a little bit too, is it should have come in the device. The Ableton LFO tool does not work on the Push 3 standalone, but somebody else was able to write a Max for Live LFO tool that works better than the Ableton one, but you have to pay $10 for it.
I'll pay $10 for that. That's nothing. Like, to make it work, yeah.
But like you said, you just paid $2,700 for something. Ableton should have made theirs work.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't have to spend $10 on some other coding dude somewhere else that came up with this other idea. But so it is not perfect by any means, for sure. But I think it will be in 6 months. I think it's going to be an unbelievable machine. I think it already is. I think it already does what no other machine does. But it definitely has its drawbacks for now, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, the thing that I'm struggling with is because of my workflow on all of these boxes is that. It doesn't integrate.
Right.
Like what I found myself doing was going over to the Push 3, grabbing an MPE patch of like some like trumpets or horns and just shit you're like, oh my God, the sounds that are coming out of this, it blows your mind. We have an Osmos.
The strings. The strings.
Oh my God. Like, you want to make house music? Go get a Push 3. The
strings or the pianos for house music are unreal.
Yeah, it's bonkers. And we have the Osmos at Patchworks, and I've played the Osmos, and the Osmos is cool. Don't get me wrong. Fully MPE. It's got the Hagen engine, I believe that's how you say it, and it's all MPE. The whole engine is that way. The device itself doesn't feel as the Push 3 does. The Push 3 feels like a granite countertop. Like, this thing feels like. It's just so nice. It's such a premium device, and the MPE is it's so good. But for me, it's just a synthesizer at the moment because I don't want to abandon my set. My set is in here. My whole entire set, and I play a show every month at least. This month I'm playing twice. It'd be hard. It's hard for me to write new music on that machine, but bring this for my set. And then also be like, oh, no, I also need to learn Ableton. which I know a little bit, right? Because I know Bitwig, so it's like they're pretty compatible in terms of like what's going on, but it's just it's overwhelming.
Yeah, it's I agree with you. Like when I go to play live, I'm going to play live with my Elektron setup because as of right now, I'm better on it. I'm faster on it. I know where everything is. It's like all of that. But at the same time, there's certain things that I've already found. Like you and I've had this conversation before that I'm not a sample guy. Like I definitely prefer synths to samplers, and I've never been much of a sampler. Like I'll use one hits, but I've never been like a chopping sample kind of guy. I started messing around with sample chopping on the Push 3, and it was so cool. Being able to sample directly into it and then slice it using a simpler, using all different ways to slice it and slice it directly to a drum rack where you've got every slice on a different track that you can then create an effects chain for on that track. It was pretty amazing. And I've never been a sampler guy. And I was like, oh my God, this is so fun and so easy to do.
But it doesn't have a built-in radio. Okay.
Well, I mean, then I'll have to get an OP1 field, I guess.
If it only had a built-in radio, then I might be a little bit more excited about that.
Yep, exactly.
I am glad to hear that you're doing some sampling. I do think like sampling is the best. Sampling is my favorite. If somebody was like, you only get one thing, like if you only get one of these boxes on the table, well, I don't know. It would be a cross between one of these two, but that's just because they're both samplers.
Right.
But I feel like I might go with the Digitakt just because it's going to be more fun to make music on versus the Octatrack, which is just going to be more of a how do I work around this problem kind of situation. You know what I mean? Except for when I'm using it as like the performance mixer, where I feel like I've all but captured every essence of things that I want for a live performance mixer, except for what we talked about earlier with me being able to EQ in a new track. But 2 Octatracks could cover that, which I do have, so we could do that. And
then it'd be more expensive than a Push 3.
It would be. Yeah, you're right. The cost of Octatrack's gone up so high.
Something else that's really interesting too, and this is one of the things that I've been using your performance template for, just as I'm kind of messing around and coming up with ideas, whether I'm going to record them or whether I'm going to perform them, is I like to have performance effects while I'm writing. Because I like to be able to play and feel what that's going to feel like. And I do that in when I write in the box in Ableton, I have drum racks and effects racks of macros that I've built over time that I put on my master so that, all of a sudden I'll be like, I wonder what this would sound like if it all got filtered up together. I can do that. And those macros, I was able to port over to the Push 3. So now on my master track, I have all these cool macro effects chains that you can do, like single knobs that do like an effects riser that does multiple different things. And you can set those macros up to do it like that. So from a writing standpoint, like a production standpoint, it's really cool because you can do those kind of performance-y things with it that it's really hard to do with a mouse and, a mouse and push and click, right? But you can do it with the Octatrack. And so that's one thing I've really loved about writing through this performance template.
That kind of brings me back to like this thing about like with like the Push 3 versus the Octatrack, right? Mm-hmm. Like when I'm talking or as a performance or Push 3 versus Elektron is really what we're talking about. It's like Octatrack be damned, whatever you want to do. Is that to do what you just mentioned, effects racks on the master track on the Push 3, for one, you have to know how to build an effects rack. Do you know, like, people that are performing music or DJing or writing music in general, just because they know how to write music doesn't mean they know how to build an effects rack.
Right.
That's like a whole nother side of your brain. We were like, this is about writing music, but okay, now let's talk about how do we create modulation? How long does modulation last? What's the depth of the modulation? How do I do CC mapping? How do I have a hardware controller work with this device? All that kind of stuff. And if you don't already know those things, Push 3 is going to crush your skull. It's going to kill it. It's going to drink your soul. But you don't need to know all that to do this. You just learn the Elektron stuff.
Well, but there's a reason you're the only person who has come up with this killer template, because you know how to build effects racks in an Octatrack. and nobody else does. Like I can build an effects rack in Ableton. I have no idea how you do what you do in the Octatrack. So I think that like you can jump on an Elektron device and write music. And I think you can jump in Ableton or Bitwig or on a Push 3 or on an MPC and write music. But to have the depth that you have to come up with the performance template, or that, you know, other people are doing with other devices to make them do things that are kind of out of the norm, I think that that's a totally different world. Like I tell you this all the time, like I have no idea how the Octatrack does what it does when I'm performing on it using your template. I have no idea what's going on. I just know that I like this effect, so I'm going to use it. It's kind of like if I had, you know, a Pioneer DJ mixer and it had this built-in effect and I could push the button and make the effects out. I have no idea how they did that.
I guess you're right.
But you do, and that's the crazy thing. There's very few people who do.
Okay. Well, actually, I've not actually thought about it in that perspective. I just have a hard time even believing that. Like in my mind, anybody who gets an Octatrack is going insane and like diving into every nook and cranny and like figuring out how do I do this, how to do it, you know, how do I make a beat repeat, how do I make a beat repeat with that gets filtered, how I make all that. Like that's, I don't know. So that's what I thought.
I get asked all the time, and I'm sure you do probably even more than I do, but like say like, you know, should I get an Octatrack, or I just got an Octatrack, what should I learn first? Like I get that all the time. And what I always tell people is the same thing that people told me when I started to get into modular. I say, figure out what you want it to do and learn that thing first and dig into it and learn how to do it. Then figure out another thing you'd like it to do and then learn that thing. But you've already been through the 1,000 things that it can do. And for somebody like me, that's going to take me 10 years to get to the point where you are now.
Right.
You know, so that's why everybody's digging your template, because it saves us 10 years of having to figure out how to make one ourselves.
I get that. I get that idea. What's funny too is like, well, I mean, I get that on a holistic level. Like I just want to enable people to make music. That's like the whole, like even running hardware music events, like creating a space for hardware music only. Like I know that's like people are like, can I, you know, play with my laptop? And I'm like, I'm sorry, you can't. Like that's the rule. It's not that you can't, because one, you're going to have a polish that doesn't exist in these boxes. You know what I mean? Like that's something like it's not fair, it kind of in a way to the other artists that are playing with their hardware, because we don't have a master compressor track with Ozone, 10 running. You know what I mean? Like that's not a thing. Like we have to, like you got to show your skill with these boxes, but it also is giving people an avenue to just use their gear in general. Just use your gear and show people your music. And I like that. And I do like that the performance template has been, you know, received so well and people use it. I've had a lot of people hit me up. They just bought an Octatrack, never used one before in their life. First thing they did is they put my template on it, and that's all they've done. And I'm like, all right, yeah, why not? Nothing wrong with that.
That's a great use for it.
You're using every feature in the Octatrack, because that's the template uses every single feature the Octatrack has, almost every single effect. And you're using parts and banks and patterns and sampling and resampling and recorder trigs and every effect and LFOs and LFO designers and all that stuff. It all exists in that template. So you're getting your money's worth out of your Octatrack, but you don't know how to use your Octatrack. But also, it's a bit archaic anyway.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess, do you really need to know how to use it if it's helping you make music?
I don't
like you don't need to know how to build the plane to know how to fly a plane. And I think it's kind of the same thing. Like if people don't know how to build a performance mixer, that doesn't mean that they're not going to use it to make something really, really cool that makes people have a great time on a dance floor. That's awesome. And that's how they should. I forgot to ask you, actually, I was going to ask you this before. I was actually going to message you when I saw this video the other day. Did you see Cenk's video?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, when I saw that, I was like, I mean, you talk about I mean, this guy for years was the Elektron guy.
I mean, he was my inspiration to get
Yeah,
into Elektron.
and I mean, when I first started getting into Elektron, his were the first videos I watched because I was like, "Whoa, this guy is blowing my mind." And then to see his recent video that he just put out this week of him doing an entire live performance on a Push 3 and a Perkons, and it was killer.
Yeah, it was.
Like
and
the set was great,
and it sounded just like his Elektron sets, and which is like that's the sound that I like. Like I love. I feel like Data Line's sound is the sound of like electro house or electro or electronica meets techno. It's like it's that real. He crosses that ground where it's like those two things go together really well. He clearly knows both genres like the back of his hand. And he knows.
Yeah, he plays in that middle ground between like electro and techno and different kinds of break beats and drum and bass, and he like kind of goes around between all of that, which is awesome.
Yeah, which is something I'm trying to implement more into my own music is like, I don't know, I rarely ever play with a break beat or anything. I really want to do it more. I would do it on my Digitakt. I don't think it does it that great. I think this does it really well. This is like the breakbeat god. Like, actually, so check this out. This is cool. So remember that you were like, hey, I figured out how to route the tracks in through. That has been like, that's so cool. I've been showing people how to do that forever. I can't believe I wasn't the one to think of it. Damn it. But
I can't believe it's the only thing I figured out on the Octatrack.
It's pretty dope. But it was really dope. So I had this idea. I have 2 Octatracks, and my idea is I'm gonna take my gray Octatrack that I have the battery in. Oh, it's so pretty.
I love the wood on the sides.
It's so. I use it for all my YouTube thumbnails because it's just so pretty. But this wonderful battery-powered machine, which is just, I just love it so much. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna cue out these tracks and use the cue output as my melodic tracks, and then I'm gonna use these on the main outs. So I'll use cue mute track on these tracks as opposed to the send effects version.
Right.
And then I will have these go out the main outs. This will be drums, so 4 tracks of drums, 4 tracks of audio, and then run that directly into the Octatrack. And use the performance mixer with this being the only sound source. I think that just these 2 boxes together could be a really fun experiment and could also write some really interesting music.
Yeah, totally. Especially with, I mean, Octatrack is great for writing music, and neither of us are using it for that. So get a second one. Are you familiar with a techno artist called Headless Horseman?
I don't know their music, but I have heard.
So he played at that same show in Berlin, actually, where Isobutane played solo on the thing. And Headless Horseman is an absolutely phenomenal live techno performer, and he performs on modular and Elektron gear. He has just changed up his setup, and he just posted a couple videos online of what he's doing with his new setup. His new setup is 2 Octatracks, period. That's his whole setup. And it sounds pretty cool. Yeah. Like he's doing some really cool stuff with it.
I think it's like what I really like about this battery idea and 2 Octatracks is my modular. It doesn't come into the YouTube channel very often. It will more so because I picked up this stupid Assimilator, but having this one be so portable and not need to be plugged in anywhere, which is just I don't know about you, but like I'm such a person of convenience. Like I want to make content on more stuff than what I do right here, but unplugging all of my shit and then plugging all my shit back in makes me so annoyed. Like I'm just like I just hate it. I want like a separate. I wish I could have my whole camera set up over here, which I even have it so that this camera can move. But then I don't have as much depth of field because I'm a little obsessed with the whole cinematic vibe too. But anyway, so I can. So
you need to hang your face camera down from that other rolling rig so that it moves with it.
You're right, actually. I don't know if that's correct.
Maybe I could do it right now.
I feel like that would, because that's what the microphone does. The microphone moves with it, so I can do that. But Well, anyway, what I was saying is taking an Octatrack, especially this battery one, and these sides, these are cool wood sides. They're like glued
So
on,
cool.
basically. It's not glue, but there's 2 pads that come with it. Of course, there's dog hair also attached to it. But yeah, it's real pretty. Anyhow, taking
Awesome.
it, going over to the modular system, and sampling, like clocking the modular. I picked up a Hermod Plus that's going to be here in a few days. I'm actually really excited about it. I think it's going to, I liked the Hermod, the original one, but I thought it was a terrible interface. Like it was like the features it had were awesome, but to actually use them was gut-wrenching. Like it was just awful. And I felt that way a little bit sometimes when I was doing some stuff on the Oxy one a little bit, where I was like, the Oxy one was definitely way easier to use than the Hermod. But it like some of the stuff I was like, it's like really buried and it's like these weird, I don't know. I just, whatever, I don't want to say anything else. But like taking this and going over to the modular system, sampling a 4 or 8 bar loop, if you watched my video that I released yesterday, sampling an 8 bar loop into the Octatrack, either chopping it up or not chopping it up. Because it's in stereo, I can have all the effects from the modular system, and like if you're not having dope effects in your modular system, why are you even doing modular? It's like the whole point is that you have built-in guitar pedals like in a box. So like getting all those
my single favorite module in my whole case is the Endorphins Ghost. It's my favorite.
Really?
I run everything through it. I run everything through it. I love it.
I do like it too. I do like it too. I actually have no, like I've used it many times. I made a video on it for Patchworks. I have no complaint about it. I will complain. I never complain about anything at Patchworks, of course, because that's, you know, the opposite of what I'm trying to do there. But I will complain about things here, and I don't have a complaint about the Endorphins Ghost. I did think that was a really cool module, and it is.
My only complaint about it is that it's noisy. But what do you expect when it's got distortion on reverb, on overdrive, on whatever? Of course, it's going to be noisy. It's normal.
Wait, that reminds me. That is the complaint that I had about it. So is Make Noise's. Not Spectrophone. Why am I even thinking that? But the Mimeophone, which has been in my case since it first came out. The Mimeophone, it has some noise issues, but I think apparently they fixed it with an update I haven't done yet.
The thing is with the music, I'm the opposite. The music that I make, the noisier the better. So it doesn't really matter. Like if my signal was clean, I would use extra modules to make it sound noisy. So it's like, whatever. I'm good with that. I don't care.
There's a difference. Like there's noisy like music, and then there's just the sound of ground loops. Like they're not pretty.
Yeah, I played a show. It was like 2 months ago or so, and it was this really amazing sound setup. They had this huge Danley sound system that they put in for, it was like in this warehouse, and I got up and did my sound check, and I got done and like stopped playing, and I turned to the sound guy and I was like, okay, cool, I'm all good. He's like, yeah, sounds great. And then he's like, what is that? And he could hear the noise. I was like, oh yeah, it's just my rig. It just makes a lot of noise. And I switched it off. He's like, okay, cool. I thought it was my stuff. I'm like, no, your stuff is perfect. My stuff sounds noisy, but that's just the way it sounds. It's all
Have
good.
you used a ground loop? Just, I'm curious because I put on these shows all the time, and I always carry ground loop isolators for all the modular people because everybody has ground loop isolation problems. But if you can get a really cheap one for like $6 even, and it will that will go away.
Okay.
Whatever, you don't care.
I'll just call it added distortion.
You'll just throw it through. We'll just sidechain it.
Exactly, sidechain the ground loop. It's perfect.
Yeah. We'll just make a nice rhythm out of that, or whatever.
Exactly.
Run my ground loops through my Octatrack. That's actually my show now. Is just ground loops. Oh.
That should be your new performance name. Ground loop.
Ground loops playing. Oh God. If anybody was named, like, I would avoid any show that was called Ground Loop. I'd be like, I hate this person. I hate what they stand for. Don't want that in my life.
That's so funny. Something else, a little bit off topic, but you were talking about your moving microphone and your moving camera. At that same show in Berlin, it was like this huge long table of all different hardware setups. And they had this great monitoring system, and the monitors were on rails. So as the performers would go, they would move the monitors to that performer's section of the table. It was the first time I had ever seen that, and it was really, really cool.
That is really cool. That's like a very in-depth setup they got going on. I would love to have some more like cool stuff like for the Mod Bang events, but It's really just me and my buddy Toby who's helping out a bit there. 120 hertz is the new 432 hertz. We have quite a few people in the chat here. Maybe we should
Yeah.
say what's up. Are you able to see the chat? I don't know if that's.
I am. I actually have it up on my other monitor here.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you see anything on here, just go ahead and call it out. So are you playing any shows soon?
Yes. So here's a funny one. I'm going to play a house DJ show next month, which will be super fun because I haven't DJed house in a little while, which I'm very excited about. And then a buddy of mine is just doing for the next 3 months a new pop-up here in Denver that's a basement warehouse space with a great sound system installed in it. And we're going to do a couple of events there. I used to be part of a DJ collective that was here at Beta nightclub. When Beta was the #1 nightclub in the world, we had a second room that we did once a week. And now we're getting that group of people back together for a DJ show. And then we're going to try to do a live show as well on a different night, which will be, we're going to try to do like the store in the round setup, so that we can get a bunch of live performers kind of in the middle of the dance floor with people all the way around it, so they can see what's going on and kind of be behind the performers and watch the show. So it's, instead of just like, a pet peeve of mine is playing live shows where you're in a DJ booth and nobody can see what you're doing. So like, you might as well be DJing, because for them, they're only getting the sound part. They're not actually seeing what's going on and seeing what's going into the show. And I think that's a super important part of it.
It's definitely an important part of it when it comes to hardware performers.
Yeah.
Like, I think like when DJs and stuff, they're more fun to watch the DJ dance than it is to watch what they're doing. Maybe, unless you're a DJ, because then you get what they're doing. But as a person at a venue, like, if you don't DJ, it's not as fun to watch. There's not like a million buttons and dials that they're tweaking like they are on here. I do feel like the hardware thing, like, it's important that we have a camera that shows this, because I don't know. It's kind of like seeing the guitar player play his guitar. Like, totally. I want to see what he's doing when he does a guitar solo. You know what I mean? I want to watch a drummer on his solo. You know what I mean? I want to see every little tidbit of it.
Yeah, we had, I don't know if you saw the pictures that I posted that were from the show I did a couple months ago with Lady Starlight and Travarsi and Alex and Tunnel from Minneapolis and a few others. It was this great installation, and they had cameras on all of our gear, so that when each person was playing, they had this huge projector behind us, and there was somebody that was live mixing video or live mixing visuals, and they were mixing in the visuals of what we were doing with cool visuals in the background. So you could see, even though you could come right up and see what we were doing, you could also see it, overhead way in the back of the room. So you could kind of get a good picture of it. It was very cool. I like
that a lot. I really want to come up to Colorado and play some shows with.
Anytime, man.
You and
let me know.
You and Alex. And
I want to get out your way too.
How's the Aphonic doing?
Brian, he's awesome. He's great.
He's great. I really had a good time. He made me laugh quite a bit.
Yeah, it's funny. You probably saw when he played his set at NAMM, you were talking about playing with a laptop. So he plays this massive modular system without any other hardware, except he has a laptop with Ableton. And what he does is he uses sequences in Ableton to sequence all of his modular stuff. And then he runs the modular back into Ableton for effects processing and then out. And so he's using it sequencing and effects processing.
That's that's the way to do it. Like, honestly, like, if you wanted to, if we were to just be like totally honest with ourselves and like just eat the truth, like, we're just like, okay, it's like, let's be real. Let's be real. What's going to have the best sounding live show? What's going to have the best sound? It's going to be a mixture of your laptop and a modular system, or your laptop and some hardware synthesizers. If you mix those two together, you have the best sound. You're going to have everything that you need. You're going to have, you're at the limit right there. Basically,
and that's how Brian plays. I mean, that's really his setup.
Well, that's what
for me, that's, seeing the way Alex is starting to integrate the Push 3, that's what the Push 3 is going to be. It's going to take the place of the laptop in that setup, because you'll be able to use it to sequence your modular, because it already has CV and gate out. So you can use
Well,
it,
it doesn't
sequence your
work yet.
modular. It does. CV Tools works in it now.
Oh,
I don't know if it didn't when you got it, but CV Tools work. So you can sequence it just like you can, you know, you only have 4 channels out, but whatever you can do. Anyway, you can use a MIDI module as well, like what most people do when they're using that separate. Yeah, eat the truth. But that's where it's going to be, is that people will use the push 3 to sequence things in their modular, and then the audio for their modular will come back into the push 3 to be processed through its audio interface and then out to the mains. And then, like, for example, in the box production template, I have on my master, I have my mastering chain that I use like to finish tracks to release on Beatport and iTunes and whatever. And the mastering chain that I use, I have a version of it that's only able to native plugins. It doesn't include any external plugins. So I can just put that mastering chain in my push 3 and I can make it sound like a master track.
Well,
I mean, obviously,
what about latency?
You know,
so one of the problems like that I don't have latency issues with my Elektron setup. Like zero. I don't have any MIDI latency. I don't have any audio latency ever. It's always exactly on time. Everything is perfect.
Yep.
That is not the case anytime I integrate a computer. And as soon, like I have an RME UCX. We're talking RME's the shit. It's the best. I don't care what I have an SSL mixer. I have the Big 6 and I have an RME, and I would like they're both. I mean, I go all out when it comes to my audio stuff, right? I put all my eggs in the basket of like, there's no bottleneck for my audio signal. You know, balance cables, good audio interface, good mixer, right? Everything I get it's gonna be the best sound I could possibly get. Mm-hmm. Of course, I'm bottlenecked at my skill, right? We're all bottlenecked at our skill. We're bottlenecked at our whatever our sound source is. I feel like Elektron's, you know, it's pretty freaking good. So it's like. It's fine, although I do think the signal is better over USB. Like if you use Overbridge with your Elektron boxes, it does sound better. Like in terms of how clean the sound is. Not in terms of like, it's not gonna be a better performance because it's gonna feel a little bit dead compared to what it is when you're playing like live or whatever. Right. But I always have a MIDI, not always have a MIDI thing, but I definitely have like some audio latency stuff that I have to go in and do some correction. Again, bringing this like, this level of like how much you have to understand computers and audio engineering and how much you have to understand Ableton or any other DAW, you like they're really heady topics. Like to explain to somebody how to find how to set up correct delay latency on a track for incoming audio for like say you're processing your modular system so that your interface and your modular like look like they're hitting at the same times when you're sampling. You're at a zero crossing. That whole workflow to explain that to somebody who doesn't know that much about it destroys their brain. Like it's like I can watch them just be like I don't even want to do it. Like they don't even want to do it anymore. And so that's like one of the things.
And I would say even when you know how to do it, that's one of the reasons why I got away from doing so much stuff in the box and wanting to do more stuff with hardware is because even when you know how to do it, it kills your vibe. When you're writing something and you're like, oh shit, I've got a MIDI issue. Now I've got to start like messing with stuff. Yeah. So it's like, I would rather just be on hardware and just not have those issues. You know? But yeah, no, I get it. I'll see, you know, I haven't really messed with the push 3 with my modular and having it go back through it yet. I did do it with the analog rhythm. When I first set it up, that was the first piece of gear that I put it with. And I was like, okay, I'll just do drums on this. And I want to mess around with the MPE stuff on this. And I was running that back through and it was fine. I didn't have any latency issues with that, but I don't know what it's going to do with modular. I haven't tried to sequence modular yet. I haven't done any of that. I'll ask Alex because he's starting to do that now. So we'll see.
Question. I just adjusted some mic settings. Whenever I do, we're doing this on StreamYard. So for those of you who are watching, this is going into StreamYard and then being broadcasted out to YouTube. When I do my streams on YouTube, I have full control over my gain settings for my audio. Right now, my gain is like maxed out in StreamYard. This is something to do with the SSL Big 6 because that's my interface. Because if I don't use it as the interface, Anyway, there's a whole
You don't hear
conversation there's a whole conversation to be had about the SSL interface thing. I don't recommend it as an interface. I do recommend it as a mixer. I don't know, maybe a bit, but this does sound better. Okay, I boosted it up. Well, I'm glad somebody said something, even though we're getting towards like close to the end of our stream because we've been going for a while. But I'll remember that next time me and Eric do something like this, to just boost that audio. But yeah, shit. What were we talking about?
Talking about using the push 3 with modular.
Yeah. Okay, my workflow with the push 3 straight up so far is no other machines. I brought in the RME interface with it, and I got it all set up. I got it working good, and I put in my I plugged in a SM58. So I was like, I'm just gonna use a dynamic microphone so I can get loud, right? And so it doesn't pick up the room. We got fans going. You know, it's 80 something degrees out, so it's like it's hot, right? And I got fans going in here. I'm using dynamic mics to try and compensate for that. And like I like the idea that on the push that all of the instruments on the push, all the settings in the push, the Max for Live instruments, Ableton or whatever, that I'm stuck in that box, as opposed to having the option of bringing Serum over, of having the option of bringing Ozone over. Like I don't like that idea. Like I think that's, of course, I should like that idea, but coming from this like workflow where I want some restrictions, because one of my problems is, and why I like Elektron and the Octatrack and all that stuff, is that I like to dive into the nooks and crannies and look for the walls and then run my fingers across the walls and find where the seams meet, like to the floor, and like really go in there and be like, all right, this is the room that I'm working in, and now I'm gonna build my art here. You know what I mean? When I'm on my computer, like Bitwig, for instance, with the grid and everything that it can do in Bitwig, the scope creep that I experience is so incredible that I find that I don't get anything done because I'm just like, I'm sucked into, like, where do I start? What do I do? You know what I mean?
You get decision paralysis.
Big
I have
time.
to say, now this ties this into something else we wanted to talk about. That's my one negative feedback on your new performance template, is that there's too many choices now. There's so many good effects that I'm like, oh, what do I want to use? Like if you've only got like 4, okay, cool, I can use 4. But now it's like, and already I was like with 16, I was like, okay, well, out of the 16, there's about 8 that I really use a lot. Some that just didn't suit my style, so I just didn't use them. Now there's so many good ones on every single part that I'm like, shit, now what am I going to use? Like there's a lot of great sounding stuff. I wish there was a way to kind of copy and paste and make one and just be like, okay, this is the one I really like, and I'm going to use this one now.
I hear that from people all the time. That is, you said you wish there was a way because there isn't a way.
I know there's not a way.
But I will say for you in particular, for anybody who's playing like techno that's using the performance template on their Octatrack, playing in space, which is the first part,
that's been my favorite one so far,
is going to have you covered. That one whole set of 16, like there's everything you need in there. There's the acid delay, there's huge buildups, there's easy drummer, there's a high pass, low pass filter, there's resampling. Everything.
I'm right with you. That's the one I've been using the most. But
that's
then
the one I designed first.
I'll go to a bunch of the other ones, and like the Crush one, there's some really cool sounding stuff on there. And I was like, wow, this would be so cool. And so now I'm like, okay, now how am I going to remember I need to switch to that part and then go to this effect when I want to do this thing? And I just have to get used to it. I have to practice on it more.
I look forward to seeing this.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I got to get out there sometime so I can show it to you live.
Oh yeah. Well, you might come out and play in August, right?
You tell me. As soon as you say yes, I'm there.
I put your name on the bill.
Okay, well then I'll get a ticket.
I mean, I haven't like sent it out to like Eventbrite or anything yet, but I wrote it down as to have you play. Cool. So yeah, if you want to play the August show, well, let's keep talking about it, because I want to make sure that like something isn't planned by my partner, like where I'm like, no, you're actually playing later. a later time or something.
Steamrolling
But
with stuff.
yeah, I don't want to like I don't want to like do that. But yeah, I definitely want to have you out to play. I really want to get Alex out to play here too, and everybody to come hang out at Patchworks and visit the shop. If folks don't know what Patchworks is, that's a synth shop that I work at here in Seattle. It's kind of like Perfect Circuit, but in Seattle, and a little bit of a different vibe. But we have all that same stuff, Eurorack, all that good stuff. So please check it out, patchworks.com. I want to do a commercial for them because I love Patchworks. I love the shop, and I want the shop to thrive. Also, if anybody's still here watching this, and seems like there is,
we actually there's more than 40 people still just watching us just like blab on about stuff.
Well, good, because it's a Sunday. Nice. It's a Sunday night. What else is there to do? But go to modbang.com. Use the code if you want to pick up either the Elektron riser here, which I need to send you one too, Eric. But if you want to get yourself one of these, the riser here, there's this bright light.
I just like you to look right here.
Oh, you do? Oh, you already have one. That's right.
I have one there, and I have one there.
Okay, so all right, perfect commercial. Perfect commercial for the risers. If you want to get yourself a riser, which they're modular now. Actually, hang on, let me show you this. This is so dope.
And those ones that I got made it to Berlin with me, and I had everybody at Super Booth like, "What is that? What is that riser?" And I was like,
because you can take them apart.
Check it out. Yes.
Because they use thumb screws.
So good for travel.
It's perfect for travel. They weigh less than 5 ounces. But hold on, this is really cool.
And for anybody who doesn't know what they are, the cool thing about those things is that like everybody does risers and stuff, but if you don't know what they are, the cool thing about the ones Matt came up with is that they're flat. That's what makes them so cool. Like everybody else's risers, you get like carpal tunnel when you're trying to work on your stuff. And with this, you've got that flat look. So if you're working, like all of us, I don't know that any of us are lucky enough to play on tall tables when we perform. So we all have to break our backs playing on low tables. And what's cool about this is that your gear is flat, but elevated so the cables go underneath. And they are awesome. Like
check this
they
out.
are amazing. Oh, whoa. That's so cool.
So they're all fully modular. This is like this one on the left is the stand for the Digitakt. Yeah. This one on the right is the one for the Octatrack Analog Rhythm Mark I, Analog 4 Mark I. And when you buy the little bar, you can connect them, and it comes with screws.
So cool.
And you can put a Digitakt and an Octatrack on a top row. And we do have angled ones as well that do the same thing. They're all modular. They're just not in the shop yet because we're not done making them.
The flat ones are the cool ones.
That's how I feel too, but like
the cool ones.
Everybody argues with me that the cool ones are the angled ones because everybody loves that screen view, but I don't care about the screen. I care about the knobs.
Can I tell you who that is? And I'm just going to tease somebody I don't know who you're talking about, but I'll tease whoever said that. If you're playing out live shows, you are always going to play on a low table because that's what promoters have. And so you're always going to be looking down on your gear. So having it flat is great. If you don't play live shows and you sit in a chair at your table at home, you want it to be angled so you can see the screen better. But I can tell you live wise, I have all kinds of like, here, I'll show you. Here's my version of all kinds of stupid little risers and
I mean, I've bought so many different kinds of stands for all
this
stuff.
One and whatever. And the problem with all of them is that the angle. And as soon as you came out with the flat one and I tried it, I was like, where's this been all my life? This is exactly what I needed.
Yeah, look at we made them for the boutiques.
Oh, nice.
Which is what this is going on. So now I can have I'm working on this new stand right now. We're calling it the sidecar for the M8. Mm-hmm. And what it does is it's actually, if you have a riser for your Octatrack, you're going to be able to clip on this table to your Octatrack. It's just going to clip right on right here. And the M8 will sit there and it will hold your M8 next to your Octatrack.
Will it only fit the M8?
I mean, you can put anything you want on it, but like the idea...
Could I put a 1010 black box? Because that's right where it sits in my setup. Look.
Yeah, you could put a black box on there. Yeah, you could.
And it sits on the floor. So if you had a little side thing, would just go right on there. That would be awesome.
Yeah, if you have any ideas, hit me up. Because like we're designing them all ourselves and manufacturing them ourselves. And we've invested a lot of money into being able to make these like actually be nice products.
Yeah, they're awesome. I mean, I can tell you firsthand that it's so nice to travel with because those thumb screws you guys put in there made it really easy and quick to take them apart. And so you get done, you have to break down before the next performer plays. You can just take them and just take them apart super fast, and they don't weigh anything to put in your carry-on luggage to travel far. So yeah. I love them. Thank you very much. Great.
Thank you for giving me such a nice endorsement here. I definitely appreciate it.
You and I think both are the same in that we, even though we get accused all the time of being fanboys for different things, I am all about whatever works best. And if you give me something that works better than Elektron gear, I will sell all of this stuff and get something else. It's not that I'm married to them, but I love how it works. So that's why I use it. And your stands work great. And when things work great, I use them in my setup. And so, yeah, they're awesome. They're really, really awesome.
Actually, I really like that perspective, musically speaking, because like the music technology, like we're constantly coming out with new pieces of gear. Like we have the like one of the newest things that's the most amazing, and I know you bought one. I don't know how far you've gotten with it, but like the M8 is maybe one of the best new pieces of music technology that has come out in the last, I don't know, since the Octatrack. I'm not sure. If this was out before I had picked up any of this gear, I maybe never would have picked it up because this probably would have just covered all of my bases to begin with. I mean, there's only 8 tracks. Yeah. Can we make them like kiss somehow?
Yeah. Can you show me how to use it?
I can.
Everybody tells me, oh, you're into Elektron. Trackers should be easy. I'm like, I get that it's a sideways tracker is an Elektron. I get that. For me, the thing with the M8 that I need help with is setting it up and getting from thing to thing. I understand the parameter locking by step and I get that part of it, but man, you and I need to sit down and talk about the M8 because I really want to use it for when I travel for work. And it's just collecting dust, unfortunately.
That's like the ultimate. It is the old. So it's like the OP1 field. I know that you should. I know that it's your favorite synthesizer, the OP1 field, but I feel like that and the M8 are like these two things I own that I like. I don't use them as much as I use these pieces of gear, but like the part of my brain that they occupy is the part of, hey, I'm going somewhere. What do I grab? Like
So I travel a ton for work. Like I think I did almost 60 flights last year for Jesus. My day job. So I want this. Just like, and we don't have to rehash the whole conversation, but just like that's why I wanted the OP1 field to do that for me. I was super excited when it came out, but the MIDI implementation to take a sketch from that back into my workflow when I get back to my studio after a trip made it unusable for me. The way that it doesn't connect correctly and easily, I couldn't use it. But this, I understand, it does that really, really well. So I want to get to the point where I can use this well so I can have it do that thing when I travel.
The M8, what makes the M8 like so special is that the M8 was developed by a musician who used trackers. But it's really, the M8 was developed by a musician who also had the skills to code up the machine.
Right.
So it's like these boxes were also like this, the Digitone, and the Digitakt. I believe the Digitakt had a lot of influence by S as well. Mm-hmm. But like this is S's design, right?
Yeah.
When he worked at Elektron. And that's a musician designing an instrument, made FM approachable, because it wasn't. It isn't. FM is not an approachable synthesis technology.
Right.
It like sounds like garbage until you really understand FM. And even as I'm teaching people how to do FM, it's hard to even tell people what is happening, like to articulate it in a way that makes sense. So devices like the M8 have all these cool features like MIDI learn built into them that are so simple. You just literally one of the 7 buttons that you have to choose from, you hold it and then turn a knob on a MIDI controller, and all of a sudden it's linked. You know what I mean? And like stuff like that. That exists on the Octatrack, but I mean that's kind of a buried feature in the Octatrack. It does have MIDI learn, but like that's something that should be across the board on all instruments. The only thing that Tim from Dirty Wave didn't get on here, and I know this is not an omission, it was just literally couldn't get it, is, well, two things. A microphone. If this had a microphone, this thing would be even more stellar. And the other thing is USB-C. Not having USB-C is a problem. Everything should have USB-C.
Right.
But I know that he wanted USB-C, he just couldn't have it.
I was
Same with
just
the
going
boutiques.
to pull up for you. There
What do you got? What do you got for me?
What is this? I can't find it now. Shit. There is a again for Ableton. There's a new Max for Live group of devices that somebody came up with. Well, I say this somebody. I'll use it quotes because then I'll tell you afterwards. They came up with and they said, turn your Ableton workflow into an Elektron workflow. Just like the Digitone, just like the Elektron sequencers, just like this stuff, and it comes as a package of Max for Live devices,
Opal devices,
and Opal, exactly. That's what I was.
I have them all, yeah.
And so it came out, and I was like, "Wow, this does." And then I found out that it was S that designed them, so of course they feel like that.
Yeah.
So again, Max for Live devices that work on Push 3.
Do you have a link, like off the top of your head, like you could possibly throw in the chat or whatever for like that LFO tool? Because one, I know I can get it from you later, but if other people watching this are interested in that and they have a Push 3 and they want that tool, because I really like, that's one of the problems I'm having right now is that with the Push 3 is that it doesn't have, I want infinite LFOs. I just want to grab an LFO. Push 3 is supposed to have these unlimited features. I want to use them, but I can't. I gotta log into, I gotta connect it to my computer, which honestly takes 2 seconds. It's not a huge deal. I just don't want to turn on my computer. You know what I mean? I just, person turquoise waving. That must have been an emoji that didn't turn out well. But I don't want to get on the computer. But I do want those LFOs, so.
Yeah, I'm going to pull this up. I can't remember exactly the name of it, but I will.
The Push 3 is much more stable, Ignacio. It is much more stable once you downloaded Beta Update 2. I don't think there's a third update out yet. I imagine it'll be out soon. But it is still missing some key features. One of them being that it cannot receive MIDI clock. It cannot receive transport, start and stop, or clock. So if I wanted to take the Push 3, write a bunch of patterns on it, and kind of do the workflow that I would with, like, say, the Nerd Sequencer and my modular, or with a tracker in general, I can't do that because I can't have this be my master and the push follow. And once they add that feature, you know this thing is going to be over here. Honestly, I would just maybe take the Digitone out of my workflow. Not that I don't love the Digitone, but just to have less because the push is so much. Like, maybe I'd take out the 303, I'd use the 303 in the push, take out the Digitone. But the push doesn't have analog synthesis, so it's not going to replace the Syntac. And it doesn't have all these buttons like this, so it's not going to replace my Digitone. And it doesn't have my performance template. And I'm afraid of its latency in terms of using its effects on the master chain. Master chain effects are like known for slowing down your latency big time. That's something I was curious. Like you took your chain from Ableton, you put it in your Push 3, but you're not having latency?
No, because I'm using the Ableton native ones. They're not external plugins. So that's one of the things about using the Ableton native devices and the Max for Live devices is that if you ever notice, I always used to joke that Ableton looked kind of lame compared with all the other DAWs out there because it's so minimalist. And that's the thing is that they don't have this like fancy animation and super nice skin over their, pedal to make it look like like a Sound Toys pedal or something like that, because they kept all of that to keep the latency down.
That was why they chose that. They do have
that's
skins
one of the main
for
reasons, but
their DAW. You can make it look pretty cool. I wish
but all
Bitwig
that's just
had.
like color changing. But
It's true, but I wish that I could put a skin on Bitwig. That would be dope. Because I like, as pretty as Bitwig is, it's like I would love to customize the way it looks. I'm lured into the tracker devices, especially the M8, but I'm kind of intimidated by the hexadecimal workflow. And you should be intimidated by the hexadecimal workflow. It sucks compared to like what you're used to. Having to adopt starting at 1 being 0 is not fun. Like, that's awful to do to your brain. But you do get used to it pretty quickly. So it's not the end of the world, but like it's definitely it's not the best thing. Really, a plugin you noticed slowing stuff down was Ozone. Well, definitely, you throw Ozone on the master track in Ableton, Bitwig, Logic, FL. I don't care what DAW. You are getting latency. It's not going to play the minute you hit start.
Totally.
Ozone's
it doesn't matter what your computer is. It will jitter as soon as you start it up, and
yeah. There's no way around that. But it's that way for like, 50% of any sort of EQ mastering device that's not native to your DAW.
As well as a lot of synths and a lot of sample instruments and a lot of everything.
Yeah. Warpigs. I would be interested in the M8, but all my workflow is based on live recording into a sequencer and Electrons. Yeah. The Octatrack works perfect for that too. And the Digitakt. But the Octatrack in particular, live sampling can't be beat. Oh, here we go.
All right. So that link is the link to the LFO tool.
Okay.
That same person, by the way, when you go on that page, if you go to their Elizabeth Homeland is the name of the Gumroad person. They just came out with an Ableton latency fixer as well, which you can put it on any track. After you've recorded an audio track from whatever instruments, you put it on the track and click nudge, and it lines everything up to a zero crossing.
Oh.
And it's a Max for Live device. Like all these things that Ableton should have built into them, but don't. The cool thing about Max for Live is it's kind of like with Deluge open sourcing all their stuff. Ableton open sourced the ability to write plugins for them. And now there's literally thousands of them all over the internet. Anything you want, you just search it and it will work.
You're right. I mean, that is one of the things that Ableton really nailed that Bitwig doesn't have is that Bitwig doesn't have anything. Like the devs at Bitwig, they're second to none. Honestly, I think the devs at Bitwig, they're like aliens or something. I know aliens are like in the news everywhere right now, but they're actually just the employees at Bitwig because they have like super technology and they have super brains for making the best DAW ever, but they don't let anybody contribute other than like making stuff on the grid, which is basically like working in modular, but even a level down. So there's like modular, which has a VCA pre-built for you with ins and outs. You go into Bitwig and you're like, you have V. You got to build the C and the A and like build it all together with the inside the grid. And if you don't understand synthesis, like you're going to have a mind melter. Like just your first moment there, you're gonna be like, what am I doing?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like we were saying before, like there's no perfect thing, like perfect piece of gear, but you find these things, whether it's a DAW, whether it's a groove box, whether it's hardware, whatever works best for your stuff, and as soon as you try to put everything in one box, it makes them glitchy and not work right. And, slow and not enough memory and all that stuff. So you have to kind of pick and choose what you put in there.
I think that is what the Push 3 is doing. They're putting everything in the one box. And it is making it a little slow for me. Partly, I feel like I'm experiencing a bit of scope creep on it myself. I think like I should maybe just focus on like writing some really simple music with it to just like, like I just want to go straight to what I do here, which is like, go over to the dual VCO on the Syntact, write some do some really cool sound design, play with LFOs, parameter lock a bunch of stuff, and like I just can do it. I can do it so fast. I can do it in 5 minutes. I feel like if somebody was like, Matt, make a song in 10 minutes with all these machines, I could do it. And I'd be like, that wasn't a piece of garbage either. It was like it sounded decent. Like it was okay. It needed work. But
here's something that I would suggest for you, because I know you haven't been a big Ableton user in the past. If you go into Ableton in your computer and make a template of, okay, I want the default MIDI track, like for example, in my template, which I ported over to my push 3, every time you add a MIDI track, it adds it with a utility and an EQ8 on it. Because I just always find myself using those whenever you want to modulate, or whenever you want to record automation of volume. You always do it in a utility, so you always end up putting that on there anyway. You can mono things, you can mono below a certain level with utility. So I just throw it on everything. So now if I go into my push 3 and I put add a MIDI track, it adds a MIDI track with those two effects already built onto it.
Wait, how do I have it do that? It does that on the push?
Yeah, so basically the best way to do it, because again, it's clunky doing it on a Groovebox. If you go into Ableton and make a template and save it as a template, just like you save your performance template, and then pull that over and have that be your starting template on your push. You just load up a template with these tracks that I like. Some of them are MIDI, some of them are audio. These ones have these synths on it that I like. These have these effects that I always use. These, every track has an LFO because you like LFOs. Every track has an LFO. Every track has an EQ, and every track has a utility.
But wait, hang on. But when you load a new track, a brand new track, it pre-populates the devices with a tool and an EQ8?
So make sure we're using the same version as track. So track as in a song or a project, no. But if you load a template project, just like you do with your performance template, you're loading up a template.
So you don't mean like adding a new track. Like I have, say my template has 10 tracks on it and I want 11 suddenly.
Yes.
It's not going to pre-populate it with those.
Yes, it will.
It will.
Yes, it will. So in Ableton, you can create your automatic track, your default track, a default MIDI track and a default audio track. So if you say add a MIDI track or add an audio track, and you've made that default always add with a utility and an EQ and an LFO and a filter, that's how it will always load.
Oh my God.
And it will and you can save that into the push 3. That's how I've been doing it in the push 3 now. Anytime I click add a MIDI track, it adds a MIDI track with a utility and an EQ8. Oh. Because that's how I set it up. So it's kind of like the Octatrack. It's a pain in the ass to set things up, but once you set them up, it's pretty easy to use.
Okay.
So again, you were talking about how you can go in quickly to an Elektron device. That's because that Elektron device has a default set of devices, right? It's got an LFO per channel. It's got a filter. It's got a whatever. So just build that as your default track and hit add track, and then you've got all those things. And you can even add track with an FM synth on it. You can add track. You have your add track be add track with an analog modeling synth. Add track
it'll give me a list of options of kinds of tracks to add?
No, you pick one as your default.
Oh, okay. Because I was like, well, if there was like an add track with analog synth plus 30 LFOs, like,
right.
That'd be cool.
So you can save those though as devices. So if you want to have, it won't be your default one. So like now, when I do just understand click that plus part, add track, it will automatically add whatever I've told it to add as my default track.
Yeah.
But then you could also have, like I want this set of parameters to be my, when I add a, whatever Matt's cool synth, when it loads that, it will load an FM synth, 3 LFOs, a filter, an EQ, a saturator, a distortion, and whatever you feel like, whatever you want. And then anytime you load that preset, that's what it will load as your track.
That's the same as Bitwig. And that's cool. And I expected it to have. You can't build, but you can't do that on the push 3. You can load that from Ableton into the push 3, but you can't build an effects rack in the push 3 in its current state. I know that
Correct. In its current state, you can't. And that's why, like, for example, when I was saying I had effects racks, those are ones that I've built in the past. And I ported them across, and now they're saved in memory. So now anytime I take my push 3 anywhere, I can load up that effects rack.
Right. Yeah, that's cool.
But you have to do it there first to move it across. And some of these things you don't have to do there, but it's just easier to do with the big screen, and you click and drag and move this over here and duplicate to a different track and save as this. Okay, now I'm just going to bring it over to my push 3 and use it like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's pretty groovy. I dig that.
Yeah.
Why don't you have a 303? That's what.
So I have had. So when I was in college, when I was first getting into making synthesized music, I actually had an original 303 that I bought from a guy for $100, and I sold it for $300, and I thought I made out like a bandit. And every day I wish I had never sold it, right? So I've had that. I've had both of I've had the Roland version that you have there, and I've had also the Behringer version, which is actually just like the old one, equally as messed up to try and sequence and all that stuff. But I found that I just like to make those sounds instead of having an instrument that just makes those sounds. I mean, like, I like to make them within the synths. I like to make it in the Syntakt.
The synth. Okay. That's like, I've made it in the Syntakt, and I agree, like, it's cool. You can make the sound of the 303. That's a whole nother topic. But I swear to God, you cannot truly make the 303 without a non-resonant 24 dB filter.
True.
So if you don't have because that filter creates the squelch that never self-oscillates. And this filter, all it wants to do is self-oscillate. That's like its job. It was like born to self-oscillate. It's so resonant. You can use like how much resonance can you use on an analog track on the Syntakt? Like, the value goes up to 127, right, or whatever.
Yeah.
I forget what or 63. The value goes up to positive 63.
And you can use like up to 30.
Not even. You can use like up to 15 or something before it's squelching, like whip, whip, and it's like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want that much resonance. I'd rather like, but again, then there's like the Moog ladder filter, which you can't use any resonance at all because you lose all your volume. Again, actually, while I said that, I just want everyone to know, in the whole universe, anyone watching this that's new to synthesizers and gets a Moog or something, when you buy a synthesizer, don't turn its volume up all the way. A lot of times you'll see the VCA knob on a synth, like that's the volume for your patch, like in a Prophet or something. You would save the volume for your patch as part of the patch. You don't have it turned up all the way. You need your patches to match the same volume as another patch. You can save, you want to save some headroom in your patches. So if you're using a ladder filter and you turn up the resonance, right, you lose all that volume because the bass gets sucked out. But if you prepared for that by having the volume down in the first place, you just boost the volume, which is a ridiculous thing that I have to say it, but I really believe that so many people have not known that and have been like, it removes all the volume, but the truth is that you just didn't have it. You used it already.
Right.
You used
exactly.
They wasted the good surprise on you.
Exactly. And I will say also, as far as the 303 goes, I usually, like with my live setup, I usually have my modular. So I usually have a couple different synths that I would use for kind of acidy sound. But the real answer to your question is because I'm kind of over the acid sound, because it's such a trendy, popular thing in techno music and has been for like the last year, that it's like, okay, like come up with another sound in techno right now. Like if you listen to anything from any of the big labels, so if you listen to like Drum Code Records, 99 songs out of 100 have an acid sound in them. And it's like, okay, I've had enough.
Well, that's because like my experience so far with playing in the techno genre, which we'll have to do another stream sometime and just talk about this because there's so much to talk about with techno. And you know so much about it, I could learn so much from you. But like, my experience with playing with techno is that like that techno is just the most gate-kept genre on the planet. Like the techno producers want to critique every other techno artist. They are like, that's not techno, or that's not right. Those levels aren't right. Those hats aren't right. They're using a 909 again. Oh my God. You know what I mean? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I appreciate what you're saying, where you're like, I don't want to do it because it's being done so much. I want to have something new, and that's great. And I think we need more producers to think that way. I love the sound of the 303 because I'm newer to techno. So it's like, you know, it's a sound that I like. And I was like, I just love this.
Yeah,
sound,
I mean,
but
there's a reason why everybody used it for the last 30 years, because it sounds great. Like, it sounds great in a mix. You can hear it through everything. It sounds killer on a big sound system. Like, there's a reason why, just like the 909 drums, there's a reason why everybody uses them, because they sound really good.
they
But
do.
at the same time, it can get overused. It's funny though, you say about the gate kept thing. I think with any, and this is maybe something, there'll be a different insight into this coming from the dance music world of DJing and producing for so long versus the singer songwriter world. It's not that everybody feels that way. It's that all the new people feel that way. They all want to be this kind of like hipster thing where, like, oh, did you hear? He's using this. Oh, did you hear? The people who've been doing this for a long time, nobody cares. Like, everybody's about like, oh, cool. Yeah, use that. You know, you want a good hi-hat sound, use a 909 open hat. Like, it will add energy to every song you make. I guarantee it. You want to make the crowd go crazy, put a 909 hat on the downbeat of every single downbeat, and your crowd will go absolutely bananas. Because that's just the way it is. It's cool. It sounds good. But the people that are new, they try and, I always tell my kids, like, some people build themselves up by building themselves up, and other people build themselves up by pushing everyone around them down. So it makes it seem like they're bigger. New young producers, of which there are a bajillion of them, since, you know, music's easier to produce these days, a lot of them try to make themselves sound cool by putting everybody around them down and being like, oh, you do this, you do this. So whenever you hear somebody do that, that's probably somebody who's pretty new to the game, and it's not somebody who's been around for a while. Like, if the people that I know, like artists that I know that have had hit records since the 90s, every decade up until now, and still have hit records, they're not like that at all. They're not.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear.
But I think it's the same in a lot of music too. I think a lot of different genres, especially in electronic music, you know, like the bass heads are like that. The house people are like that. The new people are always the ones, you know, like in the house world, you're never going to hear the old school house guys complaining like that, but you'll hear the new guys. And it's the same with techno. It's the same with all those.
You know, like, I was thinking as you were saying that, I was like, what else is like that? I was like, yeah, if you talk to like the metal, like, I grew up a guitar player, singer in a band, and like, so like I played like alt rock. That was kind of like what I like to play. It probably shows in the music that I write, because it's very melodic. But yeah, alt rock people, they're the same as the techno people. Like, they're going to critique other alt rock artists and like, you're not doing it right. It's a little bit less so because it's so much singer songwriter stuff. But if like the metal genre, people in metal, they're very critical of other people in metal. Punk bands will critique other punk bands. There's a lot of space for that, because
for not being punk enough.
For not being punk enough, or just like, or it's sounding, not being, it's sounding too good. And once it starts sounding clean, like you have some real production, punk people don't like it because it doesn't sound punk. It sounds like pop punk. And that's, you know, we don't want to be associated with pop punk. Kind of like a lot of like hardware artists don't want to be associated with DJs. And that's a really real thing that's like very prominent currently in this day and age.
Within the DJ world, I can tell you, it's like, oh, what do you mean you play on a laptop? You don't, like, I play vinyl. Oh, what do you mean play? What do you mean you play with a USB? I play vinyl. Oh, what do you mean you don't write your own stuff? That's another one. Like, you're not a producer. It's like, well, no, it's different skill sets, being a producer and being a DJ. Some people are both. Some people are one or the other. But it's like, there's all of that. It's always there. And it always kind of makes me laugh.
It is always there.
Whatever.
It's not
it's
going
creativity.
anywhere.
It's art. It's supposed to be like, I'm sure painters are the same way, and writers are the same way, and poets are the same way. Like, I'm sure they're all like that.
My mother is a painter, and she's really good. My mom she's like a stupendously professional painter. Like, her stuff, she does a great job, but she's extremely critical of herself, and also sometimes of other artists as well. I can just see it come in sometimes where I'm like, you know, cut them some slack. Cut them some slack. You know, not everybody's been painting for 40 years. You know what I mean? Like,
and even those who have maybe aren't artistic. Like, you can, like, just like with music, you can learn all the skills and you still may not be musical. Like, you might not have artistic. That ear. Yeah, right. There's skills and there's creativity, and you don't necessarily automatically get one with the other.
You know that's what sucks, Eric, is that you don't always get one with the other, because there's some, like, for the same reason, I bought a Starlabs MIDI guitar because I can express myself through the guitar better than I can through a keyboard, better than I can through a step sequencer. That's for sure.
Right.
I'm having my own issues with it. Well, that's for another day. But I bought it for that expression because I have my creativity, but a lot of times I can't express it through the means that I have in front of me.
Right.
Just because.
That's why I love that there's gear for everybody. Because if, just because the OP1 field isn't an expressive instrument for me doesn't mean it's not for somebody else. And if it is, awesome, get it. Whatever it takes to express your creativity. That's why if somebody wants to DJ and express their creativity using tracks that somebody else wrote, but they're great at selecting music, they know when to play the right song in the right context for the room, that's a total skill on its own. That's an artistic skill that great. There's a lot of DJs that don't know how to do that, and they're big time DJs, and they have no idea how to play a room.
I'm 100% going to figure out how to play a techno set on an OP1 field. You
should.
I'm going to do it. It's like, this is a goal that I have because I never use my OP1. I think it's beautiful. Like, I just own it and it sits there, kind of like the TX6, where I'm like, also like the TP7. I was like, TP7 looks really cool. I don't know am I recording like detective interviews? Like, that's like what it does. I don't know, but I would never use it, but I think it's really cool. But I really would love to be able to like show up to a gig and be like, all right, I'm going to play a set, and then just pull out an OP1 field and just play a banger, like it's just a hardcore banger with
just like he did on the Polyend at that show that we saw. Like, pull up with one piece of gear and play something super cool. Do it on an M8.
Well, that's a piece of cake. Like, if you know the M8, like you can pull bangers out of your ass. Like, same with the Polyend tracker. The OP1 field only has the 4 tracks. I mean, it's the workflow. I was gonna say sucks, but like, I guess it kind of does. Like, in comparison to these things, the workflow is just weird. But
the thing for me that's hard with the OP1 workflow for techno is the tape workflow, because that doesn't really lend itself to sequencing and working on sequences and coming up with variations of sequences. It's really conducive to coming up with melodies, writing a melody, printing that to audio like you do in a tape deck, and then using that in other stuff, which is great if that's your workflow. It's not mine, but if it's yours, that's amazing, and it would probably be a great instrument for those folks. For me, that's why I love Elektron stuff. I love the sequence. That's why I love the Perkons. I mean, it's 4 tracks too, but I can tell you, I can do a lot more with 4 tracks on a Perkons than I could do with 4 tracks on an OP1 field for the style of music that I do. But if I was writing melodic stuff, I couldn't do that correctly.
Oh my God, you just gave me a great idea for a competition that I think I'm going to do. I think I'm going to do this. I've been trying to come up with an idea for a competition to like give away some stuff. Like I have Modbang, like give away a riser, give away some MIDI cables, give away some patch cables. But I wanted to give people something to work towards. And I just realized this should be the competition. You have 1 track on any Groovebox. It could be an Octatrack, I don't care. Any machine you have to write the best song you can possibly write. All you get is 1 track to do it. How well could you? I mean, you have to take advantage of the delays and reverbs and maybe some resampling or something. I don't know. Maybe 1 track's not enough.
I think
maybe
if it was
2 tracks.
I think if it was 1 track, that would make it automatically an Elektron thing. Because of all the parameter locking and just being able.
I mean, it probably would be an Elektron thing.
It would become a Digitakt thing, because then you could parameter lock samples by step, and it would be super amazing to do 1 track like that.
Would it be super amazing though? That's where the competition would come in, because it might be super not amazing.
I think like going along this whole idea of the OP1 field, do a 4 track, and it could be 4 tracks there. It could be 4 tracks on a Perkons. It could be 4 tracks on a Syntakt. It could be 4 tracks on an Octatrack. You could write real music with 4 tracks.
That's a good idea. You could definitely write some real music. So 4 tracks, any machine that you own, limited to 4 tracks, hardware only, we'll do something. We'll make a competition out of it, and you'll win some shit.
Yeah.
And that would make it so OP1 people could do it because they have 4 tracks.
Exactly.
And that would make it all the Elektron people could do it, and the push people could do it. And
I have to tell you, I would never try to even do it on a push because it's not set up like that. Like really, you wouldn't have an advantage doing it on a push. The only advantage you have on a push is being able to add devices to a track. But you don't have all the parameter locking. You don't have all the ability to parameter lock synths by step. Like I would way rather do that on a Perkons or an Elektron than I would rather do it on a push.
I would like a Perkons.
Yeah,
I really do like the Perkons.
I was actually playing with it right before we got on the stream today because I hadn't messed with it for a while, and I was like, oh yeah, I got to get back in there. And it is instant techno machine. Like within 20 seconds, you can be performing a newly improvised techno track on the Perkons.
I know, and it sounds really good.
It sounds
analog
so good.
filters, digital oscillators. That's like the smooth move. Like that's what everybody should be building is analog filters.
I
digital
love
oscillators.
What for me the genius thing on the Perkons is that you can live record in automation for any of the knobs on it. It's so good. Oh my God.
But I mean, that's like Elektron.
Yeah, but it's a knob per function device. There's no screen, there's no menu, there's no nothing. Right. And you can do that just with every knob that's on the face of the machine.
That is cool.
I mean, imagine if you had like a sub 37 Moog that you could record automation of every knob on its face.
That would be insane, yeah.
It would be nuts. And that's what the Perkons is like. It's crazy.
Yeah, I do want one.
So
they
good.
are also they're not cheap. They're in the expensive. Have you ever played on a lip loop?
I haven't. I saw a really cool video. Are you familiar with Surgeon?
Yeah, I've seen that video.
His lip loop video is really cool. Like I had never even really heard of it, and then I saw that video. I was like, wow, that's awesome.
I really want to get one.
He does a lot of stuff that a lot of people can't do on devices. Just like
I mean, he's a pro. Like yeah. Have
you seen his live rig now? When I saw him at Store, what he's playing live on is a Pulsar 23 with a what's that other sequencer that's kind of the same format as it looks like a scaled down BeatStep Pro, but it's a really great sequencer.
The Oxy one?
No. It's like the competitor of the Oxy one. It'll come to me. I can't remember the name.
The Torso?
Torso, exactly. So he's playing with a Torso, a Pulsar 23, a Black Box, and a Lemon Drop.
A Lemon Drop?
And that's his full-on set. I'm going to get a Lemon Drop too.
What? Get out of here. I can't get behind the Lemon Drops.
Can I tell you why? Because of this function that Tim showed me when I was at Super Booth. It can granulate live input. So I can split off the main out of my
beads
modular and run it through that, and I can use that to chop up a granular live input and use that as the atmospheres for my live setup.
You could do that with the clouds or beads too in your modular skiff.
Yeah, but I don't have space in my modular skiff. And this thing I could
You're
put
like,
in my
yeah,
pocket.
but it's not a lemon drop. It's not.
But this goes in my pocket.
It does go in your. What do you got in your pocket? Lemon
I just
drops.
had to scale down.
They're $500.
I just had to scale down my case. Remember, I needed it to fit into a carry-on.
Oh yeah.
So now I've got everything in a 6U84.
Oh, nice.
My whole
I want to hang out and do some jamming. I want to jam.
Absolutely.
But not with a lemon drop.
I want to hang out and jam, and I want to do a session where you show me how to use the M8.
Yeah, let's do it. We'll definitely do it. We could do a video session sometime. But speaking of that,
I'd love to do. I think about every time I see you do. I'm going to make a techno track thing. I would love to do a session where we make a techno track together, where you make it, where you're actually the one doing the stuff, and I'll just say like, okay, try this. Do one of these.
I really like that idea.
It would be super fun.
Because I feel like somebody needs to do that with me, because every time I try and do it, it's like I start off like, all right, we're gonna make techno tonight, and then by the end of the night, you're like, all right, you're playing electro house music again, and it's like I'm like, I don't know, that's what I do. I don't know how to do anything else. I always just go back. All of a sudden, I'm singing into the microphone. I'm writing a chord progression. It's like all that stuff doesn't work.
So I'll give you a trick. I'll give you a trick for next time when you're doing that. If you want to make a chord progression, use multiple tracks for the chord and have each track play a different note of the chord and only use 2 or 3 notes on each track.
That's what I do on the Syntakt. That is kind of what I do for my,
Yeah, but what you end up always doing is like, okay, now I'm going to turn on the Digitakt so that I can play this polyphonic chord progression. But if you just use just the Syntakt and say, okay, here are the 3 notes in this triad that I want to play. The bass is going to play one, the mid-range is going to play another, and this high-end percussive sound is going to play another. And I'll use those in a sporadic way, and you'll have techno.
Okay.
The secrets to writing techno.
The secrets. I really do want to do this. Maybe maybe in 2 or 3 weeks we can do another Elektron Talk episode 40. The episode 40 of Matt learns techno finally.
You know what we should do? If I do end up coming out there for the event, we could do a live stream of a live techno production session from Patchworks.
Oh, that would be really cool.
And let's just talk to people about what we're doing.
Yeah, we could make it an event.
Be awesome.
For sure. Yeah, I have all sorts of stuff. I'm down to do any events. That's what I'm one of the events.
Me too.
Folks.
So whatever, let me know.
Yeah, let's do it. Once again, I want to let people know you can get these risers at modbank.com that we're talking about, but also it's 10% off for patch cables, MIDI cables. They glow in the dark. They're transparent. They're totally whack. Look how cool they are. Look at these. Anyway, the code is EZBOT23 if you want to try it out. But it's 2 hours. We were only going to do an hour. We did 2 hours again. I can't not do 2 hours streams. It's been 2 hours. We yap. Yeah, we're very chatty together. It's almost good that we live in different states.
We kept 40-something people interested for all this time, though. That's pretty good.
That's nice. Thank you for hanging out with us, everybody. But I'm gonna let Eric go, and I'm gonna let everybody else go. I'm so freaking hungry right now. Like all this talking we did
Me
made
too.
me I'm starving. So I'm gonna go get some dinner. But everybody's great. Eric, you're the best. I love hanging out with you. Thanks for hanging out. And
anytime.
Yeah, I look forward to you teaching me some techno. And I'm glad you like the performance template. Give me some more feedback.
And I look forward to you teaching me some M8.
Yeah, you got it. Anytime.
We'll exchange. You teach me the M8. We can work on techno production.
That sounds perfect. I would love this. This is a perfect deal for me.
Awesome.
You can eat the cables. They are cherry flavored. They do look like.
Look, the chatting is thumbs up. We just got in the chat. The chatting is thumbs up.
All right, the chatting is thumbs up. Thanks, Rolly. All right, I'll catch you later, Eric. Thanks everybody for hanging out.
That's good. Thank you guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks, Matt.
Oh yeah, and visit Eric's YouTube channel, SURCO Live. Check it out.
Yes.
He's got some dope stuff on there. Reviews of gear, great music. Eric's the best. There's a link to his channel in the description of this video as well. So,
sweet.
Cool.
Thanks.
See you guys later.